The following is taken from a letter written on the 26th of October 1917 by Captain George Alexander Birnie, RAMC. The following video contains images and audio descriptions that some audiences may find upsetting. Many hundreds of our good fellows went west on that day. Let me try and give an account of how 750 men went over the top. Less than 50 came back. No one looked forward to it. The weather had turned very bad. No time to reconnoitre the ground. About 6 p.m, some 5 miles from our line, every man loaded up with extra bandoliers, bombs, picks and shovels. Then the long, weary march began. About 750 strong in a long, continuous line to keep touch on account of the blackness. Hell, pure and simple, was the march. Raining, shelled, never going 20 steps without a halt. Occasionally striking duckboards, but soon knee-deep in mud again. Through that trackless bog guides lost their way. This was recently captured territory, simply shell holes and everlasting mud. Somewhere about 5, wet and quite worn out, Sergeant Brown, my sergeant of stretcher-bearers, Stevens, my servant, and I crushed into a captured Hun pillbox. I slept like a log till about 8. For breakfast we shared in an open tin of bully beef, resourceful Stevens found in the mud, washed down with whiskey and water. From a signal amending wire found I was at least 2 kilometres from the front line. I could not expect stretcher-bearers to carry wounded that far. I decided to go up and see if I could find anything nearer. By great luck I found a headquarters runner. He guided us up. We got through somehow. 'Twas a pretty hot trip. I found the CO in a muddy shell hole with a bit of galvanised iron on top to keep the rain off. Some 300 yards from Fritz, with him looking down on us. No possible place for an aid post, but in our front line was a pillbox. After consultation with the CO, decided to wait half an hour after our barrage had commenced to get through to this pillbox and establish an aid post there. After dark, the various company commanders crawled in for the final conference. Learned Riddit, one of my best friends, had disappeared entirely with about 35 men. They are almost certainly dead. The conference ended about 10 p.m. Companies to form up along a tape, which Bell Irving went out and fixed on a front of about 400 yards. I never admired the CO so much. As far as possible, he left nothing to chance. The Hun was sweeping us with shells and machine guns, but out he went, through the mud and rain all along the tape, to make sure that things were right. Companies began to form up about 11 p.m. News came in that Lieutenant Franks, a great friend of mine, in command of D Company, was badly hit. I found him lying in the mud unconscious. He died a few minutes later. Somehow we carried him back to the headquarters shell hole, for I hoped to bury him decently the next day. 0 hour, 5:25 a.m. The ground shaking from heavy shelling, the din terrific. Always the tap-tap-tap of machine guns and the soft whistle of flying bullets. They had gas-shelled us some time before, the air still thick with the heavy scent, but a wind sprang up and it was rapidly clearing. In the shell hole was the CO, the adjutant, myself, and a signaller with a telephone to his ear. Now and then he would say, "The line is dissed, sir," and out would go a signaller through shells and bullets to find and mend the break in the line. Suddenly, on a 5-mile front, our barrage opened. I have heard it many times now, each more wonderful, more awful. Tons of earth thrown into the air, whirlwind rushes and crushing explosions adding to the row, thousands of rifles and machine guns. It did not seem possible for anything to live, the very earth and air trembling. With a great cheer our battalion rose out of the mud. You could see them fall, see them blown high into the air, others still pressing on, taking cover where possible. I waited 3/4 of an hour for the barrage to lift. The cursed machine guns had not ceased. The tap-tap-tap, the obvious sound we were not advancing. Our barrage had opened up behind the Hun machine guns, missing them. My stretcher-bearers were with their companies. It became imperative that I should get to the decided pillbox and establish an aid post there. I had sent word round I would be there. The only thing to do was to go. I took Sergeant Brown, Corporal Austin, Stevens, and a Red Cross flag. It was a hellish trip. Before we had gone 100 yards, Austin fell, shot through the heart. The concussion of exploding shells nearly knocked us down again and again. Our dead were lying in heaps, the worst slaughter I have ever seen. Just for 1 minute, the most deadly fear got hold of me, the sort that might almost paralyse you. We got into the decided pillbox, but the entrance was too small. I decided to pull down the blocked-up entrance. I crawled out to find myself looking straight at 7 Hun with their rifles levelled. Goodness knows why they didn't shoot. I grabbed a Red Cross flag and held it up. They lowered their rifles and waved me back. I could hardly believe my luck, for never have I known a Hun to respect the Red Cross. However, I had just fixed it over the new door when one of our Lewis gun enthusiasts started off his gun from the other entrance. You can't put up a Red Cross flag at one door and a Lewis gun at the other. The only thing to do was go out and bandage the wounded wherever we could find them. I was very puzzled to know where my stretcher bearers were. I regret to say I thought they might be hiding in a shell hole. I feel ashamed when I think of that now, for soon I found the reason. They were all dead, except 3. One could do so little, and there was so much to do. Stevens and Sergeant Brown were simply splendid. We could not carry men away. We dressed them in shell holes. Then something red-hot shot through my neck. A sniper bagged me. I fell into a shell hole. Don't remember much until I heard poor Stevens say, "Are you dead, sir? Are you dead? God help those others if they've killed you." The more practical sergeant sliced open my tunic. "It's all right, you ain't dead. Bit of blood about, but it's gone right through." For a while all the nerve was knocked out of me. All the fellows I knew and liked, men I had been through other shows with, officers, NCOs and men, killed, wounded or missing. There seemed to be no one left. I wished to God I had gone too. I broke down and sobbed, a confounded baby. Luckily, I had a flask of whiskey. A good pull on that worked wonders. A good 2 hours before I could screw myself up to coming out the shell hole and carrying on. Can't stay in a shell hole with crowds of "Water! For God's sake, water!" going on all around. A verse you gave us once when we were kids came into my head. It's not the fact that you are dead that counts, but only how did you die? Crawled out and carried on all day, a most extraordinary experience. I have a respect for the Hun I never had before. Several times we found ourselves working in places surrounded by shell holes full of them, but none of them fired at us. Snipers pointed to where their victims were. As the day wore on, none of our men could put his head up without getting a bullet through it, but no one shot at us. The shelling and sweeping machine gun fire was the only thing to worry about. Later in the morning, the fire suddenly redoubled, and for a time we had to take cover in a shell hole. The reason was that the 53rd Brigade had been thrown in to support us. The machine guns did their work. The Burkes could not get through. About 2 p.m. I went back to the HQ shell hole to report how things stood to the CO. Had a rest for half an hour. After eating a piece of bread and a good stiff whiskey, I felt better. Went back with a message to any officers I could find. We worked carefully from shell hole to shell hole, but only 2 officers left, and they were utterly worn out. I counted about 48 of our men unwounded. I could not bandage any more, for my arm had gone stiff. Stevens and Sergeant Brown carried on. Hundreds were lying about. Buffs, West Kents, Surreys, Berkshires, and a lot of Jocks. In nearly every case there were no stretcher bearers left. All had been killed. Heartbreaking work, for so many were dying. To those in great pain and no chance of living, I gave enough morphia to put them out peacefully. It was pitiful to hear their thanks with white faces twisted into a smile. "Thanks, Doc. I'm not afraid, but this damn pain gets you down." Or a message to someone at home they would never see again. At 4:30 I saw Lister coming under a Red Cross flag. Heavens, I was glad to see him, for I knew he would come as soon as he got my message. Lister of the 55th Field Ambulance is among the best men in France. He has been out since the beginning, his right arm useless as a result of wounds, and has 2 bars to his military cross. He won't stay at base and is the only man I know who seems to enjoy shelling. This was the 3rd time he had come to help me when badly needed. He brought up bearer squads, and though some were knocked out, there were plenty to start getting wounded away. I came away with them, for I was feeling very done. I reported to the CO, and somehow I hated leaving him, though of course I could do nothing. He looked utterly worn out, only 29, but his hair is almost white. Time and again he has brought the battalion to the pitch of perfection, only to be thrown into some desperate position again and more or less wiped out. Stevens and I started on an apparently endless journey to the dressing station. I have never been so utterly worn out in my life. Eventually a motor car took us to the CCS. There I got into bed and got an orderly to see that Stevens was looked after. Stevens went off next morning and got my kit for me. That night I was sent to Rouen, a 24-hour journey. I enjoyed it immensely. There was a topping old Scottish CO, the last word in mixing cocktails. I had nothing to do but watch the beautiful green hills of Normandy slipping by. I'm not very keen about going out again just yet. My nerves are really pretty rotten and I still have rather bad nights, but it is passing off. A mail just arrived with a letter from the Colonel. An aeroplane bomb had fallen the day before right in the HQ mess. Dear old Bellerving and Corporal Braun were killed. Stevens is wounded, and the Colonel's favourite horse was killed by another bomb. Even she, the mare, makes another gap in our little company. Oh, I wish it would all finish, all the good fellows going, and the end not yet in sight.